Yeah, everyone's back now.
Okay, just a reminder that if you want to contribute, but you don't want your video to be shown later when we put it up on Facebook and YouTube, you're very welcome to turn your video off. I will, yeah, and just if you have a question, and I hope you've got plenty of questions, otherwise I don't know what we do. If you use the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen, and then I will come to you. Sally.
Hello.
Hello, nice to see you. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't know if this is a valid question, but it's something I've been pondering on the last few days. So patterns in history throughout families. I was sitting and meditating the other day, and thoughts were coming into my head about how patterns seem to repeat in families between family members. So I don't know what I'm trying to say really, but things seem to occur and then reoccur again. Have you got anything that you can say about that? That is it just that I'm looking for patterns in history that are happening sort of time after time, or is it to do with karma, that things that happened in people's past lives just seem to reoccur in the next lives, but it does seem to happen in this life? Is there any way of explaining that from the point of view of the Buddha's teachings?
Yeah, I would say that anything that what's the word I'm looking for? Any any time that we separate something off and treat it as a separate thing, whether that's an individual, a family, or a nation, you will begin to essentially the law of karma will be in effect.
Right.
So therefore actions have results, and so yeah, there will be repetition of certain patterns, but it's always important to recognize that it's not the same pattern.
Right.
So like on an individual basis, we know that when we run a hindrance, say ill will, whatever it might be, we say yes, it's the same pattern re-emerging, but actually it's a new iteration of the pattern. So it's not like forming a perfect circle. It's more like a spiral, because we're at a slightly different place when we recognize it the next time, and we're at a slightly different place when we recognize it the next time. So nothing is actually a pure repetition. It's always it's an iteration of the same pattern, but with some alteration in it.
Okay.
Otherwise, we couldn't get free of suffering. So there has to be the possibility of being able to recognize a pattern. And because what happens in meditation when we recognize a pattern, say ill will, we actually become more familiar with it. We clearly comprehend it more easily. That's changed our relationship with it, which means it's easier to let go of.
Okay.
And so it becomes progressively easier to let go of something because of the familiarity with it. So pattern recognition is essential.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, in terms of family, in terms of family history, I think it's really useful to be able to notice patterns. And in terms of being able to deal with those patterns, if it's something that needs to be dealt with, perhaps that recognition means that it becomes easier to deal with over time. If you see a repeat pattern, it always becomes easier to deal with because you're that much more familiar with it. I think beyond that, I perhaps couldn't say more, but maybe somebody else has a take on it that they can offer. Does that help, Sally?
No, it does. It's just something that's been going around in my head for a few days now, and I wondered sort of what your take on it would be or how you would approach it. But yeah, I think I understand that.
Yeah, but I think it's something in the Buddhist teaching where it's recognized that even countries, nations can have karmic, patterns, repeating patterns emerge. The Buddha definitely talks in the Pali Canon about how, well, in his time it was principalities, how principalities ought to be run and how to run them well, and what constitutes a principality that is going to flourish, and what is a principality that's going to have trouble in the future based on the way that they behave, based on what their ethics are, and so forth. So it does play out at those higher levels, definitely.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Jay, good evening.
Hi, you can hear me now, I think, with this headphone on. Yeah, hi. I was just touching on that point, and Paul, you said, does anyone else have any thoughts? So I had a thought I was going to share, if that's okay. So, I mean, from a sort of psychological education perspective, there's lots of research into, depends what the thing is that you're referring to, Sally, but in terms of families, in terms of, and I'll give an example, right, alcoholism. You know, if there's a parent with alcoholism, it tends to be that the children of that parent find it harder to, I suppose, if I get this right, if I understand correct, Paul, sort of find perhaps a more middle way with alcohol, and would be more likely, statistically speaking, not saying it's true of everybody, but more likely to go one end of abstaining or overuse themselves. And that's true of lots of from a sort of psychological perspective, lots of different behaviors where someone struggled and then cared for children, and how they learn to find the middle grounds and norms about things. So their behaviors tend to get polarized. I mean, that's my understanding of that sort of subject before considering Buddhism, as it were, or looking at it, and I'm very new to this still, but I guess my understanding of that, Paul, and please obviously jump in if I got this wrong, but is actually what I've said doesn't necessarily clash at all with anything that I understand is from a Buddhist perspective, because those experiences that those children have had from those parents as they've grown has have affected their perceptions and their cravings and their everything, so that impacts upon them, if that makes sense. If I'm in the right ballpark, I'm putting together stuff I've learned from my life up to this point and my work and things, and then sort of taking on board Buddhist teachings and seeing how they fit. But I think that makes sense.
Yeah, well, what I can do is put the Buddhist perspective on it. And Alex, I will come to you. Yeah, I will come to you. So in a Buddhist sense, what we would say is that we are based on our past karma, our past volitional activity. We have been born into this particular family and this particular environment with these particular conditions because we have to, in inverted commas, learn something. So in the case where it may be a family with a history of alcoholism, it might be, and I'm not saying it definitely is, but it might very well be that someone is born into that family in this lifetime because it gives them the opportunity to learn more about that particular subject, to reach a point where they can let go and become non-attached to it. So these are the lessons that we have. So with the whole question of rebirth, I think because rebirth does not sit in, it does not clash with evolutionary biology or anything like that. So you can look at it from two different perspectives. You've got the evolutionary aspect, which starts with the Big Bang and ends up with where we are right now and goes into the future, and it's okay, we understand that there is this evolutionary process. But there's also, from a Buddhist perspective, there is this karmic process, which is more about the arising of conscious experience. And so that's coming in at an angle to the evolutionary. And through a series of rebirths, we are born into this human life, and we connect with the evolutionary biological process moving this way, and as it were, enter into that biological stream for this lifetime, and then we move out of it and we go forward in a different direction to the evolutionary stream of the human realm. So we come into this lifetime, we join a particular biological evolutionary stream in order to learn the lessons we need to learn in this lifetime, and then we move away from it. We go in a different direction. So therefore, the view of rebirth is not in any way, shape, or form. It does not clash with the scientific, objective descriptions of reality that we get with things like evolutionary biology, and including psychology as well, and the psychology of families, and the kinds of mental and physiological activities that seem to be handed down through the DNA. Alex, nice to see you. You had a question. Yeah, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, Phil. No, it's actually just that, I mean, what you just said was extremely illuminating. Thank you. And we've been thinking about these things a lot because we just had a little girl 4.5 months ago. So
it's very real then.
yeah. So psychological inheritance and these kinds of things. So Sally, just to follow up, just because when we were expecting, I found some books which may be a lay psychology that we found were really interesting on this subject. Actually, there's one which is quite popular called "The Book You Wish Your Parents Had Read." And it's amazing because I mean, it's a bit of a soundbitey title, but it talks about a lot of these things, like when people sort of see the mirror of their parents in their actions, and they catch themselves and they're like, "Wait a minute, that's exactly what my mum would have said," or what. And it's all about those things, yeah. And so the psychological, like bizarre but logical psychological phenomena where you might end up being jealous of your child, or jealous of your child because at their age you didn't have what they had, or what, like these kinds of sort of profound psychological things that actually, if you maybe don't have the insight or catch yourself, then you are quite reactionary about. So it helps you kind of intercept the reactionary process a little bit, which I think chimes really well with how we work as meditators, right?
Best of luck for the next 18 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Grist for the mindfulness meal there.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks,
I definitely, I see some of my mannerisms and some of my behaviors are so my brother's or so my father. So it does make you wonder, well, what is me in all of this? And that's very much, getting into the depths of the Buddha's teaching. But absolutely. And I think that the whole thing with all of this is we don't actually have to change anything. It's just becoming more and more mindfully aware of the patterns. That's the key. You don't have to change anything. It's through the mindful noting and the clear comprehension that comes from the mindful noting, you realize that these are indeed conditioned and conditioning phenomena. They are impersonal. They are arising and passing away due to conditions. They're not me. They're not myself. It doesn't mean you don't experience them. And included in all these impersonal processes are things like deep, abiding love for your offspring. But the more you look, the more you realize that all these things that are arising and passing away are selfless phenomena. And that's liberating. That's not a difficulty. It's only a difficulty when you think of it in terms of self and ownership. It's the releasing, the ability for us to experience the full gamut of human experience, but without the attachment. Because it's the attachment, the sense in which you're talking about the jealousy aspect. It's the attachment that's the problem, not stuff that arises and passes away. It's the ownership of them as being me, being mine, being myself. That is the problem.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Okay. Who else has a question for me this evening? Or us, I should say. Question for us. Jim, hello.
Hi, Paul. Just noticed that I was looking at the list of the paramis, and I noticed number 8 is resolution, and was wondering if we could talk about what that is and what it means to perfect it.
Okay, what do you think it means?
Well, I mean, I want to use the word determination, but it doesn't feel exactly the same. See it in terms of willingness to let go of whatever seems to be in the way. Willingness to follow the teacher and not question, well, to see for yourself. willingness to do what it takes, I guess.
Well, I think that the parami, we have to see the parami, what the Buddha called the perfections, in their overall purpose. So the parami fulfill the mundane teaching. They're about the cultivation of really good qualities that reduce self-concern, which then is the groundwork for then being able to do the insight work, which is all about reducing self-concern through the observation of non-self. So it's that the mundane path is the way to heaven. The way we enter into more heavenly states, even in this lifetime, is through acting with a reduced level of self-concern and an increased concern for the well-being of others. All the qualities that you develop through doing that will come to your aid with insight training as well. But primarily it's the focus on generosity, living an ethical life, being kind, using our energy to be of service to others. And within that, of course, there is the whole notion of, well, when you say you're going to help somebody, you have to pull through. You have to keep your promises. And so it's developing that capacity of resolution. We say, well, I said I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. Yeah, it's that quality. And that is a reduction in levels of self-concern, isn't it? By saying, well, because I've promised this, I have to pull through with it. Therefore, any selfish concern I might have, which says I'm feeling a bit lazy and I don't feel like doing it, has to be set aside in order to pull through on the promise. So in essence, that's what I think the resolution is. But you can see what you're doing is you're training yourself in the ability to pull through on your promises, even your promises to yourself. For instance, meditating every day for at least half an hour. That's kind of the promise that comes with attending the group and being part of the Sangha. It's like there is a resolution that, no, I will pull through with being, fulfilling my part of the bargain. If I want to receive instruction and guidance, then I have to be willing to meditate in order to gain the experience of what's really going on in conscious experience. And I've got something I can take back to the teacher in order to talk about. So that quality of resolution that is forged or developed through walking the mundane path then sets you up beautifully for the resolution you need in order to fulfill the Buddha's higher teaching. Does that make sense, Jim? Is there anything you wanted to add to that, or anything else in that?
Yeah, that's helpful. There's another parami, truthfulness, you seem to be touching on when you describe that, or that's the way I think of truthfulness, is not just the honest speaking, but the honesty of promising something and then delivering it.
Yeah, because all the parami merge, don't they? They're not like discrete, separate qualities. Perhaps I should just go through the list of the 10 so that people are aware of the 10. So the 10 is generosity, ethics, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination or resolution, loving kindness, and equanimity. Yeah. So they yeah. So I don't think you just get one. If you pick up one, I think you get a whole bunch of other paramis sort of following in their wake. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, the truthfulness is like having, it's delivering on your promises, isn't it? But you need the resolution, the determination to do that.
All right. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Hello, Mandy. Hey, Mandy.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, nice to see you.
Yes, yes, for me too. I have a question. It's more practical, I think. During my lack of sleep periods, I find it very hard with the meditation, especially in the evening. And I then was wondering about why is it actually that we keep the eyes always closed? Because it's also a phenomena that we maybe want to include. Why is it we keep it closed? And that was just a question that raised up in my mind when I thought it might be helpful to just open my eyes and keep it kept myself more awake when I done that.
Okay, yeah. You know, in discussions with a teacher, there may very well be bespoke guidance for a particular meditator, which might include, say, keeping the eyes open in order to, you know, for that purpose, if it was deemed that that was the correct thing. I mean, I don't want to make it personal, Mandy. I just want to keep it general. But you can see, you know, that there is scope for more bespoke adjustments to somebody's practice in order to help them. My immediate thought is, well, why limit it to sitting quietly in a chair? I mean, if there is a real issue with sleep, you know, at various periods of someone's life, why not make, you know I say, you know, you should sit every day for half an hour. That's the general instruction, and I think that holds. But for an individual, it might very well be that the instruction is, no, go for walks, get out into the countryside, go for walks, practice there. Because essentially, yes, you're right. It isn't, you know, in a sense, we are denying ourselves one of the senses to observe. I think, generally speaking, the instruction to keep your eyes closed is because it can be very distracting for people to have their eyes open. But it can also be the case that for somebody else, it might very well be that there might be a need to keep the eyes open, but that would be a very individual instruction. But yeah, why not go for walks in the countryside and pay attention to the sounds and the sensations and and noting the phenomena arising and passing away, the smells. You know, it's like you don't have to limit it to just sitting quietly in a chair. Ultimately, we do have to see all the senses and gain insight into the three characteristics in all the senses, seeing, you know, all sights and sounds, tastes, touches and smells, and all the mental states. Does that help?
Yeah, yes, it does help, and especially the acknowledgement. When you are more tired, that it helps to stay awake. But also, I was questioning it more in general. Why is that we close ourselves off from the visual aspect then when sitting? And I also noticed for myself that when I practiced more with my eyes open during the day, it felt easier to as kind of a reminder to keep it was more helpful to also be more mindful during the day, for instance at work, because I was used to keep my eyes open, and normally it's more like conditioning, I think. So I become more mindful when I close my eyes. That's then a conditioning, a mindset of, okay, this is
All right, so you're
the
only mindful
true.
if you've got your eyes closed, sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
This is the official practice with the eyes closed, but now I can also do that with my eyes open, and that's more helpful during the rest of the day as well, to be more mindful.
Yeah,
Because I'm not conditioned with my only to close my eyes. Yeah, well, that's an experience.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think generally the idea about having the eyes closed is that it's less distracting for people, and it does aid concentration for most people. So generally speaking, we've always sat with our eyes closed. But if we understand that, then, you know, the most important thing is understanding the reason for the rule. You know, so it's not just blind adherence to the rule, but there's an appreciation of why the rule's there, and that allows for then a little bit more flexibility. And if it is for somebody that you know, there is something to be gained from keeping the eyes open in formal seated meditation, then if they're under instruction and they're accepting guidance from a teacher, then it's something that can be discussed in detail. But we also emphasize walking meditation, and that's definitely with eyes open. But the idea is to develop so seated practice is really, for me, it's like a workout in the gym, in theory.
Yeah.
What I understand people do in gyms, never been in one, but there you go. The idea being that you work out the mindfulness muscle, you work out the mindful noting, you're developing the capacity for mindful noting, the tendency towards mindful noting. And what you start to find is, outside of seated practice, you find yourself mindful noting in other aspects of your life, and that you can cultivate and develop that quality outside of the seated practice as well as inside. Because we do need to see the other senses. You know, we also don't suggest eating whilst meditating, whilst doing formal seated meditation. You know, but if you happen to be tucking into your baked beans on toast, and there's the thought, I could do this mindfully, then that's a really, really good thing. So you know, it ultimately, it is about becoming more and more mindful of all the senses and the tendency to arise and pass away due to conditions. So I think it's just seeing it in context. It's seeing that, yeah, that half an hour is daily half-hour exercising of the mindfulness muscle, and that gradually it becomes more established in other aspects of your life as well.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes, it does help, and I'm glad I've tried this, so now I can alternate between them, because I think both of them, the more formal practice with eyes closed is also very helpful indeed for the concentration, but also open to help me to see. Yeah, is also a possibility, and not to separate it that much from the rest of the day. Don't know if I make myself flippant.
Yeah, appreciate it's not your first language, so it's not always easy to express. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's an organic. Firstly, I do, you know, if it's somebody who's properly under instruction and guidance, and teacher's in the loop and knows what the student is doing, then I would absolutely encourage experimentation. You know, so if this was happening in a personal one-to-one interview, I would be going, yes, Mandy, experiment, try different things, definitely. And there was another point, but I've forgotten what those. Oh, the other point was that we do want to cultivate mindfulness outside of the practice too. As you become more aware of where the balance actually is for mindful noting, and how delightfully within ourselves it actually is, and that you don't have to force things, and that you can just be receptive and wait for sensory information to arise, you get a lovely payoff, which is fascination. You start to become fascinated. There's more pleasurable interest. You want to do it. There's this delightful sense of, I want to practice mindfulness. I prefer life when I'm practicing mindfulness, because it gives me this pleasurable interest and this fascination. And then that process of the mindfulness sort of leaking out of the formal seated practice into the rest of your life starts to become a very organic and natural process. So it doesn't have to be forced. You don't have to try to be mindful. There is just this natural inclination towards it. It comes with time.
Yes, thank you. Luckily, I do recognize that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mandy. Lynn Lucy.
Hello.
Hi.
I was just thinking about Mandy's question about why kind of in general we meditate with our eyes closed. And if it's kind of the answer you gave is the same reason for why in general you try and do it in a quiet room, because sometimes rightly or wrongly I don't actively decide to go into a quiet room. I just sit there and think, well, I'm just going to listen to my dog being loud, and I know she's going to make noise, but I've just decided, well, until she settles, I won't go to the other room. I'm just going to watch as best I can, watch the sound. So I could take myself off, but I decide not to. I guess as experimenting. But sometimes I wonder if that is kind of not helping aid concentration, because I've just decided, yeah, I'm just going to be in the room with the dog this time.
Well, I mean, what is your experience?
Sometimes it's interesting, and sometimes
Annoying.
less mindful. But sometimes it is, yeah, sometimes it is I feel like I've gained something, or I feel like I've learned a bit, and I think, well, maybe it's a good idea to not always be in absolute, if I can get an absolute silent room, maybe sometimes it is a good idea to try to try having a sense kind of going off quite a lot, to try having hearing happening a lot, just to, I don't know if it's pushing myself, but just to not close off, just to practice, definitely get some practice noting hearing in, because that might not come up most meditations if I'm pretty much just by myself in a quiet room.
Okay. Again, I'm all for experimenting. I think there is great value in having especially in the early days, of having a space which is going to be relatively undisturbed. I think that's why coming along to the centre on a Wednesday evening and being part of the community, the physical community at the centre, you have a shrine room which has been devoted to one activity for over 40 years. It's got an atmosphere, it's thick with meditative endeavour and insight and concentration, and you really notice it when you enter into that space and you meditate there. So spaces do develop certain atmospheres. However, I go back to the point that we raised earlier, which is we're endeavoring to develop the muscles of our mindfulness and the other spiritual faculties too, so faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and investigation, to such a point where we can literally be anywhere and we can attend to the arising and passing away of phenomena. Even if we're at a gig or waiting for a train or, walking down a corridor at work, that it becomes second nature to turn the attention to the reality that is actually unfolding, in order to be able to deepen our understanding of the three marks: transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, in all aspects of conditioned phenomena. Again, I repeat the same point. It's about finding the balance point, because when you find that the balance is so delightfully within yourself, and I do it so regularly with students in interviews who are struggling with energy and the correct use of energy, and we end up doing it together, and I say, okay, so which sense are you aware of now? I'm aware of tactile sensations. Okay, and are those tactile sensations permanent or impermanent? Have a look. And they have a look and they go, oh, they're impermanent. And it is literally that straightforward. It is literally that simple. And oftentimes people just will not believe it, but it is. And that is the path to realize Nibbana. That is the path through which you come to forego, let go of, renounce all your attachments to the world, through that simple process. And so a lot of the struggle with meditation is just reaching the point of recognition that that is indeed what we're being asked. That's what is being asked of us. And then once you do realize that that's where the balance is, now sometimes you find it and sometimes you lose it and you get caught back up in your over effort or whatever it might be. But gradually over time, you become more familiar with where that balance is. And as you find that balance and you retain the muscle memory of where that balance actually is, and how receptive you actually have to be rather than proactive, how receptive you are, and you're waiting for sensory information to come in via whichever sense door it is, then you start to realize, hey, I can do this anywhere. It's just turning your mind to it. So I think that it is really helpful to have a quiet space, even if it's possible to have a dedicated meditation space, something that over time you create an atmosphere around it where the mind does indeed enjoy, it settles down that much more easily because it knows where it is. It's in the meditative space. Even if that's just a corner of the room with a little something to, a little Buddha Rupa and a candle or some incense or whatever, just a corner of the room where you can create that atmosphere again and again, day in, day out. I think that is really, really helpful. But it's with a view that we are developing the capacity then to be able to meditate, what we call, well, meditation is really just sitting quietly in a chair with your eyes closed. What we're talking about is the mindful exploration of conscious experience, getting to the point where that can be done anywhere. So I remember before I was living in Bristol, this is, I think it was around the time where I met Alan, and I was living in this house with paper thin walls, and the next door neighbor had a 13-year-old girl who would play music, whatever the current music was, David somebody or other, I'm trying to remember his name, it'd be the late 90s, around 2000, I can't remember. There's one where they list the days of the week. I can't remember what the song was. Craig David. Thank you, Mark. Craig David.
Shame.
And she would continuously play this one song over and over again. And looking back, I realize it's a karmic resultant for me from having done it to my parents endlessly, the same tune. But I just carried on meditating. I just carried on because that's what was unfolding. So that's what I was with. There wasn't the clarity that there's now, but I said, well, this is what's going on. I'm not supposed to resist, therefore I'll just sit with it. So yeah, but I've somehow half erased it from my mind. So there you go, Craig David. My goodness. Oh, to be 13 again. No, thank you. Gosh, that's over a quarter of a century. Jeez. Anyway, what else have we got then? Giuseppe, hello.
Hiya. I was just thinking about the difference between something like the four right efforts, which there's a lot of effort in the four right efforts. It's quite a bit of that word effort, and then there's insight practice, and sometimes it's a bit confusing as to whether you just sit and accept, and I mean that in itself could be the effort to overcome just by observing and letting it go, I guess. But how to balance activity with not acting, activity with non-activity. And it seems like there's sometimes in my experience a little bit of a confusion over what to do sometimes.
Yeah, very good question. And I think, well, that's why we practice. And the thing is, if you try to look for the sweet point, the sweet spot, unfortunately, that probably means you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
If I could put it in a nutshell, I would say you are waiting for, how shall I put it? You're waiting for sensory experience to come to you with an open, receptive, interested outlook. So you're interested to know what it is that life is going to present for you to look at. And you wait for it. and obviously you don't have to wait very long, and note what is presented. So it's choiceless in the sense that you're not directing, because if you're directing, it suggests that you have a prior pattern that you are trying to conform to, which is a hellish prison, self-enslavement. Whereas when you just say, well, I have no idea what's going on, I'm just going to rest the attention here. And that could say, it could be lightly on the breath, or it could just be the perception of the body as you used to sit in the chair, and then you've got the perception of the body. It's just a very light awareness that where you are. And then that in itself is actually sensory information, of course, but then something impinges that then the mind adverts to. So it could be a sound outside, say. And so you have just waited. When that sound occurs and the mind adverts to it, then there is sensory contact, and then there's a perception arising of what it is, and you say it's a dog barking. And therefore you note that. And so the active component is simply the clear acknowledgement of what is actually taking place, and a willingness just to stay with it, to linger with it, not feeling like you have to rush anywhere else, because that's more effort. And so you just linger and you wait, you acknowledge fully what it is, it passes away. And then either something impinges, something else impinges, or you just return the attention back to that primary focus, whether it's the breath or whether it's the body just resting in the chair. So what is the amount of energy there? It's minimal. I would say as a general rule, you want to do the minimum amount of work, but enough that allows you to comprehend transience. But it's that. So you're starting from the premise that there's nothing wrong. You're starting from the premise that everything is unfolding as it should. There is no faulty practice that has to be corrected. There's no error. It's starting from a place of having faith in life, faith in the path, faith in the Buddha. So if it's doing some, recollecting the Buddha's qualities, or what you love about the Sangha, or what, the Dhamma, finding something that reestablishes that sense of faith in what you're doing. Because absence of faith, doubt causes terrible misapplication, terrible over effort. If you're trying to get it right, thinking that there is somehow something wrong. There's nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong. So it's also predicated on having the principles of meditation correctly, so essentially having a right view about meditation. For instance, there is nothing that should not arise in meditation. I cannot go wrong. There is just literally what's unfolding. And I just note whatever that is. And that's the problem. The problem is people find things that they don't like.
And just a quick one on that. So when a hindrance comes up, hatred.
Oh, lovely.
Or something really horrible.
No,
anything
really good,
like
really
that.
Good. Yeah. Really good. Really, really good.
Yeah. So that's so I think what I'm hearing then is it's being able to say, oh, that's hatred. That's really good. It's a chance now.
We're
making have a little look at that.
We're making it sound really, look, a little bit of, I want to murder that person. How lovely.
No, I'm sorry.
It's painful. It's painful. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. The mind keeps to, it's like having a sore tooth. The mind wants to go back and play with that same irritation, that same resentment, that
anger or something.
And it's being content with that. It's being content with being thrown about. It's being content with, the fact that this meditation you didn't get on, you didn't see it for what it was, you did get caught up. That's fine too, because that's part of the learning process. That's because
Yes.
it, you know, we can't enter into this training already free of attachments. There's no point. The whole purpose is to get free of attachment, and the reason
Yeah.
we're attached is because we're not looking at it. We don't see it for what it is. We're deluded. We misinterpret, we misperceive the data that we're getting, even with a hindrance like ill will. And so there has to be the willingness to look at it. The only way you're going to look at it if you accept that ill will is an essential component of your meditation when it arises. That,
Yes.
that, you know, we have to see hindrances, we have to see envy, we have to see, you know, like blood-curdling rage, we have to see, you know, sort of
Yes.
rancid sensual lust, we have to see
Yes.
doubt in all its various forms. You know, we have to go for the planning, we have to do it all, we have to fall asleep. I can't tell you that. I think I discussed with you recently when I had a chat with you, like when I was a monk, my blue tunic around here would turn white because I would dribble so much that all the ink in the tunic would just fade away. I mean, I can see
That's
someone
horrible.
laughing. Thanks a lot. But that's what I had to go through. I had to go through all the
Yes.
stuff and all the. I mean, I've told everyone about my weird dreamscapes of being in this green world, and everything was green. It's all totally like symbolic of a polluted mind. Even the witches. Do you know what I mean? It's just like come out of that kind of meditation going, what the heck? But that's all part of the process. And it's the willingness to include all of that you haven't gone wrong, that everything that you are just, it's only if you're holding on to a predefined pattern of what should be that you get into all the wrong effort. And yeah, sure, that, you know, the meditation is going to get out from under you so many times on this spiritual journey, but gradually you master it, and you master it through familiarity and the clear comprehension that comes from mindfully noting these things and giving yourself a little bit more wiggle room, rather than being like ultra judgmental and trying to keep everything, like keep the meditation like that. Just loosen it off. Allow for these tendencies to arise. Allow them to shake you around a little bit. It's fine. And because you've allowed yourself that little bit more space, there's just that little bit more time to go, oh, this is ill will, even if as you're being taken into it or whatever it might be. And you gradually, you just master it. It's like you just gradually transcend the hindrance. You just become so much more familiar with it. It takes time, but you gradually become so much more familiar with it that it doesn't throw you. Your mindfulness returns that much sooner. You see you start to see the parts of the process that much more quickly. And so you find yourself letting go of it that much sooner. And therefore you don't have the tendency to fall into that over effort, which is trying to ultra control everything.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really good.
Good. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I could tell you some stories. I think the Green Witch, though, I think that pretty much so weird. Talk about a polluted mind. This is why it takes time. And I think a lot of this is to do with it. It's not just letting go of expectations so much as just surrendering to accepting the true nature of the path, that it is a long-term venture, that this transformation of this polluted mind that doesn't know what it's doing, which is very confused and doesn't have any mindfulness, that gradually that becomes this mind which is just so much more aware of what it's doing, and is able to put things down so much more quickly and easily, and therefore you start to enjoy a real sense of spaciousness and clarity. But you've got to be willing to do the work. If you are willing to do the work, then it's a meditate. For me, meditation is a lifelong journey of exploration. Meditation really is my best friend. Oscar. Hello.
Hi, Paul. Long time.
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, I kind of fell out of the path. Let's say back in November. I had like some spiritual conflict within myself. I was a bit conflicted. And anyways, my question is, well, my question first, I'm gonna explain something that happened, then I'll ask the question. So I fell out the path because I was ignoring, I was being ignorant with my the unfolding of things. As I was meditating, I watched things arise. Um, kind of just went my own way, and I was starting to ignore the patterns of things, and I started to believe whatever I wanted. Well, kind of like a self. How can I explain it? Self fulfilling prophecy. I don't know. It's like you kind of self is what's the name? Basically, I started like believing whatever I wanted and making it right in my mind in a way, just being ignorant and kind of just stop meditating out of um pride and ignorance, ego.
Okay.
And eventually well, the hindrances became so clear in my life. Everything was very let's say I wasn't just feeling them, I was kind of living with them, if that makes sense. And I just don't know how to build my way up back in the path. And what's the best approach you reckon after I stopped meditating like for 3 months? And
Start meditating again. Book an interview. Come and say hello. Reintroduce yourself to the group. Jump back on the horse. Well, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing from our side, Oscar, that there's nothing other than the wish to support anyone who wants to follow the path. And we fully recognize and fully accept that people fall away.
I craved. I reckon I went wrong. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, carry on.
I was craving to be right, because I don't know. I was just craving to be right so much about anything, whereas I just started like to believe whatever I wanted and making it right in my mind, and in some ways, like pride and ego,
Well, look. I'm all for experimenting, Oscar. Did it work?
It didn't.
There you go then. So you tried something. You saw you're on the path, and then you saw this other street, and you thought, well, I'll check that street out and see where it goes. And you discovered that it was a cul-de-sac. You didn't go anywhere. So it's been beneficial. It's been beneficial because now you're going to go, when you're faced with, if you decide you want to jump back on the path again and tend the center and carry on, the likelihood is, going back to what we were saying right at the very beginning, you will get a similar pattern emerging, a strong urge, craving to be right, and to trust your own, your own thinking and your own thoughts about things. And maybe on that occasion, because you will have learned the lesson, because of your prior experience, you might make a different decision. You might say, actually, I don't really trust these thoughts. I might go and see Paul and have a chat and, take some instruction and see where we go from there, which might help you to stay on the path for a bit longer. Or alternatively, you might do exactly the same thing again, because we're human and we do tend to do things again, and that's fine too. Either way, you are learning your lessons.
While
Yeah.
meditating, I made the mistake of overthinking a lot. As I said before, I wanted to be right. Like I was always questioning, is this the right way? So I
Doubt.
just overthink. Like as soon as something arises, I know that straight away, and I even overthinking. Am I noting it right? Am I am I not being present? This is overthinking.
Yeah.
Well,
That's called the hindrance of doubt.
yeah. In your last question before, you said that doubt comes from lack of faith, I believe. If I don't remember, if I remember right, or like I was lacking faith into the practice. Like as I was meditating and I doubt myself, I didn't have faith that I was gonna be able to build good mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So I reckon that's a reason why I stopped meditating as well. Just because the more I tried to meditate, the more I overthink, and the more my hindrance was present. So
You have just described the hindrance of doubt to perfection. Out of all the hindrances, the other four hindrances can get in the way, but doubt is the hindrance that destroys someone's spiritual path.
yeah,
Yeah, and you can see why. Yeah. So, Oscar, you haven't done anything wrong. You've just seen how the hindrance of doubt is so destructive, and it's it's great.
yes.
It's great that you could join us this evening. I'm really glad you were able to. And
Glad to be here.
yeah, you're very welcome to pick it up and carry on. I know
Yes.
you're a young man, Oscar. I've reached the age where I'm allowed to say that sort of thing. You're a young man, and I assure you, you've got plenty of time to fall off the horse as many times as you see fit. In order,
I hope so.
yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about life, and that's the beautiful thing about the Buddha's teaching. It always gives you another chance. It always gives you another opportunity. Things keep on arising.
I will get back on it.
All right.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Oscar. Well, we've been going an hour. Unless anyone else has any other business. If there are any other questions, happy to answer them, but we are approaching an hour now, so perhaps a good idea to call it a day there. Oh, Mark, go on.
Just as you said, perhaps a good idea to call it a day. I stuck a hand up. It's not a question really. It was just to say how I empathise with having experienced doubt, and it just reminded me of.
You're the doubt master.
Yeah, I was a doubt master, the doubt specialist. It took me back to I used to. I must have done this about 4 times, if not more. I would have huge doubt, and it was about my ability, about the center, about the teaching, mostly about whether or not I could do it. And I was always looking for that certainty. This has to be the right thing. And so anyway, what I kept doing was emailing Orkana and saying, look guys, this is it. I'm really sorry. It's been great. See you later. Bye. And then literally 5 minutes later, I would email back and say, please ignore my last email. I'll keep coming. And I must have done that at least 4 times, if not more. It's embarrassing, really. I'm pretty sure Andrew and Brother Nigel must have seen the first email and gone, wait for it. Yep, there's the second one by the end, because anyway. But yeah, it was something that, well, I don't know if I had to go through it. I went through it, it happened. And I haven't written or sent that email for a long time, So
I don't think you're going to now, Mark. I think
no.
I think we're through that. Like, doubt is the fetter. It's one of the first 3 fetters, first 3 fetters on the first path that have to be overcome in order to experience the first path and fruition, stream winning. And it plays havoc because it in the books it calls it skeptical doubt, but I call it existential doubt. Either it is doubt in my own capacities, or it's doubt in the practice, or it's doubt in the teacher, or whatever. But underlying it, it's doubt in life itself. And it's because of this assumption of myself as being separate to the environment that I inhabit. And therefore, there is an fundamental existential issue there. What is the nature of reality? Am I safe? And so it's all bound up with the fetter of identity belief, the belief in myself as a separate entity, but I can't prove it. And so we build up all these layers of habit and ritual and views and all kinds of things in order to try to give substance to this idea of myself as a separate entity. But underlying it is this existential doubt in the nature of reality. And so that's why it plays such havoc with people's spiritual practice, and why so many people fall from the path. And in one sense, it's really, really sad, where someone's been coming along and they've been enjoying it, and then suddenly you don't see them anymore. And it's the doubt, but like, especially these days in this capacity, I'm not going to be ringing people up going, I think it's doubt. They have to come back when they're ready, or find something more suitable that they can work with. And maybe you have to fall off the horse a few times and then get yourself back on. But to give you credit, Mark, you were straight back there with the second email. You didn't waste time. It's like, so on some level, when I saw that a couple of times, I was thinking, well, he knows what he's doing. But
doubting my own doubt.
Yeah, you're doubting your own doubt. Yeah, or should I have sent that email? Probably not. Look, people get there. We've all got our weirdness. We've all got our individual idiosyncratic issues that get in the way of us following the path. Does the world really offer a viable route to realize freedom from suffering? Or have you tried enough of those to realize, despite all the doubts, actually the path, the Buddhist path, that explicitly states that it is all about coming to realize freedom from suffering, is actually that viable route? And as a closing thought, the Buddha said it is suffering that gives rise to faith. Yeah, and it's certainly the case with me. It was the inability to do away with suffering using worldly means that in the end gave me the faith that there had to be an answer to the problem of suffering. And I personally found it through following the Buddha's teaching. So, yeah. Thanks for that, Mark. Appreciate your honesty, willingness to share that experience. So there we go, having faith. Lovely to see you all. I think we'll call it a day there. And yeah, we'll get back together in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Golden.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Bye bye,
Paul.
everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul.